Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 159 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is...
the co-host with the mostest, Max Colville.
What's going on today, Max?
What's going on? I actually watched a movie earlier today, John, and I'm trying to make it like a personal goal of like trying to watch more 2023 movies this month.
Okay.
So,
seems a reasonable time of year to do that.
Yeah, so I started by watching Naiad today, which just premiered on Netflix.
Okay.
So maybe I'll talk about that a little later.
All right. Sounds good. I know people don't like our football talk, but are we allowed to talk about basketball?
I love the Celtics, so we could talk about basketball.
Well, that's great. I don't care about that. But have you seen the courts that they're using for this in-season tournament?
No, I haven't.
Oh, my God. You have to check this out.
Has it started?
Yeah, it started today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just like it's worth getting your real-time reaction, but just like go on Twitter and search for either Pacers Court or Bulls Court. Anyway, that's not really what we're supposed to be here to talk about. We are instead going to discuss another director. Is this our directors series, Max?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we've done we've done a lot of directors. I mean, we did Scorsese last week, and now we're doing Payne. But throughout like our podcast history, we've covered directors, right?
Oh yeah, since early on. But just feels like we've had a little run of them here. And yeah, we're going to talk about Alexander Payne. He's the director of The Holdovers, which is in theaters, I think in limited release right now, at least. You've seen it. You saw it at TIFF, and I know you talked about it on the podcast and presumably in the newsletter before. But we're going to just go backwards through his filmography and talk about some of the highlights and lowlights among the films he's directed. But perhaps before we get to that, we can do some news. You sent this to me. I guess you thought I'd probably get a kick out of it, but this was news that the head of HBO had, I don't know if I want to like if I'm going to use the right language, but basically was responsible for a series of fake Twitter accounts that were kind of trolling critics who left negative reviews of their programming. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, what's the gist of this? Because as you know, I'm sure, like, and I don't know how responsible he was for this, but I hold like as low of an opinion of David Zaslav as a human can hold an opinion of another human. So does this go all the way up to him?
I don't think so. I mean, this is a different guy. Like, I think his name's like Casey Bloys or something like that. And the article that originated it was on Rolling Stone, and it's kind of it's sad and hilarious at the same time. And it's just like, I guess they released some upfronts about like HBO programming in the last few days, and they were like, he was there, and he's like, oh, during the pandemic, I was just like kind of bored, and
Jesus.
it was like irresponsible of me to do this, and like that. But it's just wild. I mean, like, people are like, if this is legit, and it seems like it is, it's like, how many companies like have people who attack people, and it's probably a ton.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. This is just so funny. So one of the examples that's cited is this guy Bloys, who they said was, quote, obsessed with Twitter. Who isn't among us, was upset with Alan Sepinwall for a like mediocre review of this Joss Whedon show I've never heard about. And he created a fake account under the name of Kelly Shepard, who called herself a, quote, Texas mom and herbalist. With a response to the review. That is very, very funny. So they basically admitted to it, and said, but he like was like, oh, we only did it like a few times, so it was not that big a deal. Come on. That's a hilarious story. I mean, really, almost any story where someone like realizes that someone famous is responsible for a burner account is just so funny.
Yeah.
This one's up there for sure. But like I said, just if he's a Zaslav protege, then God bless.
Yeah, I just thought that was wild to read that. And the other day, I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday, and just the hits kept on coming, John, because outside of that, Variety had a big expose on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and obviously that's something that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about in the last year, probably because
No.
we're both kind of burnt out on it.
They
And
suck. Yeah.
so I was asking you, do you have fatigue from Marvel?
Yeah, I haven't seen a movie of theirs in like 3 years.
So I guess they need some help over there.
So what are their grand plans, Max?
So it begins with
they had a big summit, right?
Yeah, and I guess they decided that they're in trouble with Jonathan Majors, as they they kind of pinned him as the villain of the next wave, and
right.
He's might not be around for that next wave. So they're do we recast? Do we go in another direction? I mean, I'm sure they'll figure it out, but just another thing they had to do. Sure, why not?
Well, I mean, figure out how,
recast
get their way out of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're going to do something that's narratively satisfying.
No, and apparently, he makes a big appearance in season 2 of Loki's finale. And they're oh, that's not great.
Nope. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a problem. They said there's just not as much hype, and that the Marvels doesn't look like it's going to open that big. The Brie Larson.
Yeah, they did test screenings, which they haven't done in public test screenings, which they haven't done in a movie in maybe ever. I don't remember, but it's been a long, long time. And everybody thought it was just mediocre, which, shocker, the public's finally caught on. And the other bit of news that came out of that was that they were contemplating bringing Iron Man and Black Widow back from the dead, basically multiversing them back into the MCU, right?
Yeah, and sure, that the way that the comic book world works, you could pull it off narratively, but I don't know if you could pull it off financially.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How much you'd have to pay Downey Jr. to come back, or
I mean, ScarJo, that bridge might be burned from the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, okay, cool, you pulled off another trick, you got us, they're alive now, look at the face we love, that's awesome. Now what?
Right.
I do that forever?
Yeah, I think it has a star problem, right? Because Robert Downey Jr., for all his troubles before Iron Man, he was definitely had that star power.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know. I think if you could get a big star behind
I don't think that's the problem. I don't think it's that. No, I don't. I mean, I also think that it's a little bit tough. I struggle with kind of piling onto Marvel too much right now, even though I'm inclined to. But the issue, right now, they've made this very concerted push to make the movies more diverse, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And there's a lot of really bad faith actors who are going to say oh, see, they went woke. There's a black person now. That means that they're bad and they're going to lose billions of dollars. And I just think that that's not the issue. The issue is that the movies are totally disposable, and that somebody I saw made a really good point, I thought, which was that when this was kind of getting off the ground, all of these movies felt like events. They felt like they were doing something different. And you had The Winter Soldier, which was a superhero movie set in the set as a 70s Cold War thriller. And you had I don't remember all the examples, but they kind of rattle off a few examples of these movies that were kind of doing something different in the superhero vein, and that's gone. That's not really happening anymore. It's just kind of another Marvel movie, and it just feels that way.
Yeah, right. Like
Yeah,
obviously the Captain America 2 was 3 Days of the Condor
right,
with a
with
comic book
Redford.
skin. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that was cool. And like, Thor, even like the original Thor was just like a big Shakespeare movie with Kenneth Branagh directing it and all this other stuff. I just feel like they've kind of lost that novelty in the productions. And you just know exactly what you're going to get and like how many times do you need to go to the theaters to get that. The other issue, which I'm sure has been talked about ad nauseum, is that like now you have to like watch television shows to understand everything that's happening in movies, which to me was a total deal breaker.
Yeah, me too. I think like on the whole, I think I've completed maybe 2 of them
I
out of
haven't
all the
watched a
ones I've
second
done.
of any of them, but I just have
Yeah.
no interest.
Right. And so like I don't know who the person is who's watched every single minute of every single one, but
God bless him.
uh,
I'm sure there's
uh,
plenty, but yeah, it's not really enjoyable per se.
right.
So we'll see. I mean, definitely seems like this is going to be the last one. This is coming out next weekend, the Marvels, and it's like they want to do I don't want to say a reset, but like, they plan these things so far out that like you can really only pivot. Like it's hard to pivot. And I think that they're getting to the point right now where like enough bad things have happened in a row, and that there's some kind of gap maybe that they are going to try to do that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this ship has kind of just sailed.
Yeah, I think they were even talking about the Mahershala Ali like Blade
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
that they
yeah.
were working on, and it's gone through like 4 or 5 scripts, and he was
He's
gonna
talked
leave,
about
and
leaving. Yeah,
yeah, so
we'll see.
I don't know. And then like today, I don't know. I bet you didn't see this, but like they announced like their next Marvel TV show,
Oh
and
God.
it's like coming out in January, and they're releasing it all at once, and it's like the kind of grungy atmosphere that the Netflix Marvel shows did.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maybe they're hoping for a different result.
I'm sure they're hoping for a different result.
Yeah, whether or not they'll get it or not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, and then you want to talk about the new Siskel and Ebert book?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a newsletter about it probably this week, but I got a advanced reader copy of the Opposable Thumbs about Siskel and Ebert from author and writer Matt Singer,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I'm about like halfway through the book, and I'm really enjoying it thus far. It's information that I didn't entirely know.
Yeah.
I think some of the early stuff doesn't excite me as much as like once we're in the nitty gritty of the show, and they're talking about their interactions with like David Letterman and Johnny Carson and what have you, and that's really funny. And maybe like how they talk to some people. I guess there's like, of course, there's famous videos of the two of them. What am I saying? But certainly there's ones where like I guess they're on the couch with like Chevy Chase and they're talking about like one of his movies right next to him and like how they didn't like it, and that's just wild that like
That is
they
crazy.
they did that, they didn't just like bow down to the actors right next to them, and they just told it how it was. They didn't like the movie. So yeah, and it's fun to know, like I always knew that their relationship was a little prickly, but like to read the book, it's like they really didn't like each other for a lot of years.
Like they covered that in the documentary pretty well. The Ebert documentary, that is, Life Itself.
Yeah, so it seems like they didn't like each other at all, but like maybe they grew to like appreciate each other as the time went on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and so I know that uh, that Siskel did not confide his like cancer diagnosis to Ebert, and that was hard on him. But I think that after he passed, it was you know nothing but fond feelings for somebody you spent so much time with. Okay. Do you want to talk about Pain then?
Yeah, let's talk about Payne.
Okay. So why don't you kick it off? I mean, Holdovers was kind of like your special baby here this fall season so far, right?
Yeah, it was one of the ones from the fall season that I've seen thus far that I really enjoyed. It just like keeps growing in my estimation the more I think about it, and I was talking the other day how now that it's doing its press runs, I'm thinking about it more again, and I'd like to see it and enjoy it again. And I hope other people check it out. I know that like Paul Giamatti isn't like a box office star.
No, no.
I'm just hoping that the merits of the film bring people in as opposed to the star power behind it.
I mean, it's not going to do $300 million, but you know, it seems like it's a pretty well reviewed like movie that's gonna be pleasant for adult audiences. I can imagine my parents enjoying something like it. So yeah, I mean, it could do decently enough.
Yeah, what I read, John, was kind of interesting. Is like since Focus Features is releasing it, they have like a 17-day window still. So like even when this is gonna come out, it will probably be out on digital by like Thanksgiving.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, because like even like Asteroid City, the Wes Anderson movie, came out
Oh, it's true. It
super
was on
quick.
Peacock really fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So if you don't get to the theater to see this, expect to probably be able to rent it at home come December.
Fair enough. What about like, so do you want to start at the beginning, like with Alexander Payne's filmography? I mean, I've never seen Citizen Ruth. That was his first feature film. Starred Laura Dern. Have you seen this one?
No, and I don't know if I will. I know most directors like their first films are kind of like, you know, testing grounds, and so it depends if you really want to like jump into it. I guess it's the only one that I haven't seen, so.
But yeah, I don't know. Citizen Ruth, I mean, I feel like I've heard good things about it. It's not a movie that has like a huge cultural like footprint, I feel like, but it's about a woman who like, yeah, was kind of irresponsible supposedly, and uh decides that she, after she gets uh pregnant, she is going to consider having an abortion, and it becomes kind of like at the center of a small cultural firestorm or something. So, yeah, again, like I haven't seen it. I can't really say too much about it. I do, like I said, I know Laura Dern's in it. It's post Jurassic Park, so she's a little bit of a quantity, um, you know, not as big maybe as she is as today. Um, so, so yeah, can't say too much about that. But his next one really hits very big.
Yeah, I saw Election when it made its debut to the Criterion Collection after kind of not seeing it for a long time, and
Wow, I'm surprised it took you that long.
yeah, I had never caught out to it till then. Are you more familiar in this one than me? I've only seen it once.
I've seen Election a bunch of times. I actually don't like Election at all.
Then why don't you lead Election?
Sure, fair enough. This is a satirical movie about a high school like class president election. It stars Reese Witherspoon, kind of her like big breakout role. She plays Tracy Flick, who's this like kind of like type A person who feels like she's the most qualified to be elected class president. And she ends up running against a character played by Chris Klein, who's kind of like a big jock who everybody like loves, but he has nothing going on upstairs. And then his sister also runs, and she is played by an actress named Jessica Campbell, and she is kind of like the I want to say like the populist candidate, where she's just like, this is stupid, I'm gonna like do nothing, and everybody's like, yeah. And so then Matthew Broderick is like the teacher who is kind of responsible for student government and running this election, and it just becomes like a big pain in the ass for him. And I think like that's like the gist of it. But it's like a very, very, I find like kind of ugly film. It doesn't really hold up super duper well in terms of like the let's say like the gender dynamics and things of that nature, sort of like the power dynamics as well. I know that that's like part of the point of the movie, but I feel like also like at least at the time, and maybe still, like, the impression with this movie is that, like, God, Tracy Flick sucks. She's so annoying. But, like, it's, I don't know. I watched this movie. I think the last time I watched this movie, I don't know if I'll ever watch it again after this, but I watched it for another podcast I was recording at the time, like the week before the 2016 presidential election, and all of us were just stunned at like how real life it felt like, which maybe gives the film like some kind of kudos for nailing like actual dynamics. But also it was just like depressing as fuck, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, I get that, and
it's like, Tracy, like, how dare you know things?
Right. I mean, I don't know if you did a great job of like pulling this off, but it's like Matthew Broderick's character just like hates a child.
He's horrible. Well, but yeah, let's be clear. Why he also hates the child is because his adult friend slept with her.
Right.
Which is just so gross. So it's a rough watch.
Yeah, and like he does like everything he can to like try to make it so she doesn't get elected, and like it just like the shit hits the fan for him over and over again. And I don't know, like you said, it is a tough watch. It is definitely a black comedy.
Yeah, it is. I guess what I'd say about it is that like it's, admittedly, like there's some good things in the movie, but like for a good movie, it's one of the like least pleasant ones I can like. There's way darker, subject matters. One I'll talk about later on that like I find just much more pleasurable experience than watching this.
Yeah, it's funny. 1999. I always go back to this like in black comedies because I remember it very familiar is when like Jim Carrey did Cable Guy.
Sure.
And at the time I was still young, and I went with my mother, and she was like so appalled of the movie we left before it was over.
I could see it.
Yeah. I've ended up seeing the ending, so don't worry about that. But yeah, it's black comedies can be tough.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. As far as me, like I don't remember like loving Election all that much either. Maybe for the same reasons that like you mentioned, or I what's funny is that Payne has said like Election 2 is like on his radar of trying to make.
Jesus Christ.
So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I'd love for that to not happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine, because like how do you make it without like having both Broderick and Witherspoon attached, and then like what do you do with them at that point?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I feel like you could probably make it with Reese Witherspoon in the star if she wanted to, and then like Broderick just pops up as a cameo,
right?
Or you just do something totally different, and it's not really based on these characters. It's just another election that's more reflective of the time we live in.
Yeah.
As much as this one does, but, with digital and social media and all this nonsense. But yeah, it's an interesting movie. That's for damn sure.
All right. So
got noticed too.
Yeah, that was Election in 99.
So then up to 2002 and About Schmidt, which I think you have just seen for the first time recently.
I did, so I can talk about that very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one for me is similar to Election for you, where it's like I saw it once. I don't remember it extremely well, so I'm curious to have you kind of walk me through it again.
Yeah, and what's funny is like I find myself, since I really love Jack Nicholson as an actor, and many people do, I found myself like, oh, this was really cool that like I didn't see one of his movies, and it was I was like, why didn't I see this? And then I turned it on and I was like, oh, because the subject matter when it came out was not something I would want to see.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think I was like 16 when About Schmidt came out, and the movie is about Jack Nicholson, who plays a recently retired man who he realizes that he spent his entire life working for this insurance company, and like they don't really care about his contributions. He didn't really make a ton of money, and why he put his nose to the grindstone. He kind of cruised through his family life, and like he's estranged from his wife and his daughter that just kind of like exist while he like goes through the motions of working. And now that he's not working anymore, he has nothing else to do. You think that the film is gonna like settle into a rhythm like 20 minutes into it. Maybe him and his wife are gonna go in their RV and travel the world and like see how things are going. But lo and behold, he comes home and his wife has passed away.
Right.
She's found dead in their kitchen, and he realizes like, oh God, I didn't like realize how much she meant to me and like how I needed her. He's visited by his adult daughter, who is engaged to be married to a guy that he hates. But since he's played like this kind of like okay kind of man his whole life, he doesn't really get to have a say in what his daughter does as much as he'd like to. So he tries out how life is why on his own, and it's predictably hilarious because he can't really take care of himself. And he decides to take his humongous RV for a ride and visit to a lot of different places and see a lot of different things before ultimately having to go to his daughter's wedding in a few weeks' time.
So, what were your sort of general impressions?
Some of it, like, as I'm glad that like maybe I saw it now because, as like a parent, I can see like from his viewpoint, and maybe that I'm older, I can also see like how he was thinking, and like maybe like your job won't be there for you when you're dead.
Yeah.
Or like when at the end of your life, and like why put your nose to the grindstone for that and let everything pass you by. I think like that's kind of the message that I was trying to get across.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, it's not really the most uplifting movie. It's kind of like, oh, that's kind of sad and pathetic. And I think like Alexander Payne must have like been thinking from the perspective of an old man for many of his movies that he does, because he seems to like pick these characters that are somewhat damaged, and see how they journey through their life, and certainly that continues throughout his filmography.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at the time the critics were really excited about Jack Nicholson in this role because he's not as boisterous as he perhaps was known for throughout his career, and he was a little bit more subdued in this role.
Yeah, he was like, I do remember just at the time he, got an Oscar nomination for this. I think that like it was a weird year because he was like sort of one of the big contenders, and then you had Daniel Day-Lewis as this big contender for Gangs of New York. And then one of the bigger upsets at the time in Oscar history was the winner, which was Adrian Brody for The Pianist. And if you watch the clip of him winning, like all the big timers, because Michael Caine was nominated, and I can't remember who else. And
it says like, Nicolas
Cage. Yeah, Nicolas Cage. They all had like an audible reaction, like, "Wow, I can't believe that young kid beat all of us."
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's of a type of character that he's played plenty of times before, but with some different shades to it.
Yeah. And I like to think of like some directors that are like really good at getting acting nominations out of their actors.
Oh yeah, that's a great call.
Yeah, and then Payne is definitely one of them. It seems like his movies pull the best from his leading characters. And, you know, same thing I'd say with like Darren Aronofsky. I mean, his the performances in his movies have won Oscars or been nominated many times. So
yeah. So we're gonna get anything else you want to add on about Schmidt?
I don't feel like I really missed too much by not catching up with it. Like if I look through Payne's filmography, and like if we were going to point out things that like we think that you have to see, I don't think About Schmidt is like one of them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a pleasant movie, but it doesn't, like, there's a reason I haven't revisited it and why it took you this long to watch it for the first time, I think.
Right.
So I think one that stands out a little bit more than is his follow-up to that, which is Sideways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was 2004, and again, just kind of like, Election was a little bit of a breakout. About Schmidt, I think is his first time getting recognized by his peers, and then Sideways is a leap forward. I think both in quality and in terms of obviously its eventual recognition. Now, Paul Giamatti, I'm guessing this is the first time they worked together because I don't think he was in any of the other movies. He did not get an Oscar nomination for Best Actor for this movie, which was another Payne-related Oscar surprise at the time. But he did get nominations for Thomas Hayden Church as a supporting actor and Virginia Madsen as supporting actress. And I have a lot of fond memories of watching this movie. It was kind of right around the time where I was like getting into more adult-focused movies, And I went to see this in the theater with a couple of my friends, and we had a really fun time. And it's about two guys. Jack is Thomas Hayden Church's character, and Miles is Paul Giamatti's, and they're best friends, and they're going to go to, I assume it's Napa Valley, but California wine country for a bachelor party. He's about to get, Jack is about to get married. Yeah, and just get into just all kinds of trouble along the way. Paul Giamatti's character is like a real misanthrope, kind of like you would expect a Paul Giamatti character to behave. And Jack is just like a real kind of scoundrel. So they meet some women who, he wants to enjoy his time with before he's married. Miles, I believe, is divorced and has a hard time kind of coming out of his shell about with somebody else. It's all kind of set against the backdrop of like really picturesque, beautiful scenery. And I don't know. When was the last time you've seen Sideways? Have you seen it recently?
I haven't seen it in a while, but I can add to your synopsis of the movie in that Paul Giamatti's character is like a novelist who's trying to like sell his book. Yeah. And that's like a big drama for him throughout this movie. Leads him to a lot of drinking. Thomas Hayden's Church character is actually like romantically involved with a character played by Sandra Oh. Yeah. That's quite a funny pairing in the movie. But like, I think Giamatti's character was also, like you said, like having trouble connecting with women. Like maybe like it's been some time since his divorce, and he still hasn't really went out there and met somebody.
Yeah, and Virginia Madsen is set up to be that character. She's, interested in him, but not like so, I think explicit that he feels like comfortable, kind of like just going for it. I think he like obviously harbors a lot of anxiety and bad feelings about relationships in general, and kind of doesn't really want to go there, but he also recognizes that this is somebody who could be really good for him. So it's a little bit of a push and pull, and you're right, he is like, they're up there to wine taste, but like he overdrinks, and there's like just some interesting interplay, with like, how your drunk self, manifests, right? Everybody kind of has a different version of themselves, and some people are happy and wild and reckless, and others are just bummers. But
Yeah, when I saw this movie when I was 18, I wasn't doing a lot of underage drinking, but like it was definitely like, oh man, I definitely want to drink wine. Like it's like they make wine look tremendous in this movie.
Yes, indeed. I think that like my takeaway from this movie, not so much at the time, but in the time or two I've seen it relatively recently, is that like it's an excellently written movie, but like it's not like a great, like the direction isn't like great. It's not like exactly showy. I think it like uh it's a little it was a little choppy if I remember in terms of like how it's kind of strung together. But it's definitely like a fun watch.
Yeah, and it like made me a lifer of Paul Giamatti. So like I since then I've been like interested in like almost anything he did, of course, other than Billions. But I think he did an HBO series like John Adams that was
Yep.
pretty acclaimed, and I've been looking out for his performances, and I'm so glad that again he's in a leading role in a motion picture.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's cool, and in a sweet spot with this director. So nothing for a little while after Sideways, which is kind of weird. It was 7 years before he made his next movie. It was The Descendants, which came out in 2011 and starred George Clooney, Shailene Woodley, and like really the first thing I can remember seeing her in.
Yeah, she's really young in that one.
Yeah, and yeah, it's the premise is very interesting. It's about this guy who is kind of like a Hawaiian like land baron, um, and he's like trying to decide what to do with like all of this land that he was left by his ancestors, him and his like cousins and family. And set it against the backdrop of that, his wife is in like a boating accident and goes into a coma. And he finds out that while she's in the coma, that he was having or that excuse me, that she was having an affair with somebody.
Right.
Um, I I actually know somebody who like this happened to.
Wow, really?
Yes. Yeah, her mom like had like a weird like sort of traumatic brain injury incident, and she was in the hospital in a coma, and she was going through her phone to like let people know, and like found text that was like an affair that she was having with somebody.
Well, at least it was her mother and not like, you know, her spouse, right?
Oh, well, I guess, yeah, but still pretty rough. She's the
Yeah.
Shailene Woodley character in this situation.
Yes.
And she did not get, yeah, like they didn't get along super well. It's very complicated dynamics. Robert Forster's in this movie, the late great Robert Forster. He's awesome. I've seen this pretty recently. Have you seen this in the last decade?
Probably not.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
What were your impressions of it?
I was trying to remember too much about it, and like I only really vaguely remember like them in the hospital
Yeah,
with the mother, and like that was like a very like memorable part of that movie. Outside of that, I know like people were making a big deal about George Clooney's performance in it, and just a lot of excitement about his role in the movie.
yeah. He got nominated. It's I think it's a pretty good movie. There's these two halves to it where it's like the family stuff is, kind of really emotionally investing. And then like kind of when it shifts to talking about like, hey, what should we do with like our 80 billion acres of land? Like it's really uninteresting. It does like address the fact that like he's, a white guy who like owns like half of Hawaii, which I appreciate. And it kind of like, he I don't know if I want to say he wrestles with it. He doesn't really, but he acknowledges it in a way that like I feel like helps define his character in an interesting way. But yeah, it's a pretty, again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. It's a pretty good movie. I don't think it like, kind of is as good as its reputation was at the time it came out. Like a lot of these movies, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, where it's like at the time it was like, oh my God, have you seen The Descendants? Like, this is one of the best movies of the year. It was on critics lists, and everybody just like went wild for it. And like, it's just one of those movies. There's plenty of them every year where it's like after the year is over, you never hear about it again.
Yeah, as we're going through this, I'm realizing that the one that I'm just really passionate about is Sideways.
Yeah.
And every other film I've probably enjoyed by some merit, but not like jump up and down.
Yeah. So the next one I really like. That's Nebraska. And it came out, it took him 7 years, but Nebraska came out only 2 years after The Descendants. And I think it was like a little bit of a passion project perhaps for him. And it stars Bruce Dern and Will Forte as a father and son, who the father believes that he's won some kind of like, publishers clearinghouse contest, and needs to like go like halfway across the country to claim his prize, even though like everybody seems to know that he hasn't won this. But his son is kind of like indulging him, I think, because he's so distant and they don't really do much together. So it was like an opportunity to spend time together. I mean, I went on in Descendants. Do you have any strong feelings for Nebraska?
I can't say that I do. I mean, again, it's that leading man role, right? It's Bruce Dern got a real lot of buzz for his role in this, and
yeah, he got a nomination.
It's memorable for being black and white, and I'm looking at the cast in this, and it's a great cast. Bob Odenkirk is in it. Will Forte, June Squibb. I remember she was really good in this.
She got nominated for it also, yeah.
But yeah, it's really about like a father and son reconnecting, and like
it's a road trip movie.
Yeah,
they go to like the old homestead, and he's just trying to like pry things out of his dad. His memory is fading, but it's not gone. There's a lot of like really like there's a lot of like seemingly like real people in this movie, and I don't know like how much of it is actually real people versus actors that just you don't know them as well, but like it feels very lived in. I appreciate that, like almost like a Chloe Zhao movie, where she has these non-actors. Like I don't think it's quite that, but it has like a sensibility like that to it. And yeah, I think Black and White's really, really nice. It kind of just like never really betrays itself. Like I feel like some of these movies we've talked about and plenty of others, obviously, it's maybe building towards something, and then it has a few false notes here and there. Election, I definitely would say that about. I think The Descendants as well. I don't think Nebraska really has that. I think that and Sideways kind of stand out in that respect in the filmography.
Yeah, which brings us to like the next one, which was a big miss.
I never saw this movie.
Oh yeah,
I'm surprised that you did.
No, I saw it in Toronto. Like
really?
before public opinion really came out on it.
Okay.
I caught it, and yeah, it's like a weird movie because I had read an interview with Alexander Payne recently, like why he's on the circuit for Holdovers, and like he's like, oh, maybe it would have worked better as a TV show because like it's this like environmental movie where they've decided to like save resources in the world by making people smaller, right? If you're taking up less of a footprint, we can save our world, and some kind of like I'm thinking like ecological movie in a way.
Yeah.
But like the movie stars Matt Damon decide that like in order to save money, because you could spend less on furniture and food and everything when you're small, that they go ahead and do the procedure to get small. But him and his wife decide to go through with it, but at the last second she bows out and leaves him, and she remains her normal size, and he's small, so that isn't going to work out anymore. And they get divorced, and Matt Damon's character goes through his life, and he meets other people. One of the highlights acting in this movie was the actress Hong Chow, who she plays I guess a Vietnamese political activist. And she's living in this Leisureland place, and I guess the movie then has a weird twist in the second half, where they go to this other place and examine whether or not downsizing can actually save humanity.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm fine that I never saw this. I don't really intend to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I like science fiction films in general, so this is definitely a science fiction film. The idea of using science to downsize to use less.
Yeah.
It sounds like a interesting idea on paper.
Yeah, that sounds
but
exactly what I was
in practice,
yeah,
the movie doesn't work, at least.
Yeah. So that was a hit, not in the successful way, but just a hit to his reputation, I think.
Yeah, and so that's why when reviews have started to come out for the Holdovers and things like that, they're like, "Oh, he's back," and it's so positive, the reaction. Maybe it certainly helped that he hasn't had a beloved film since Nebraska.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, it's a long
crazy
time.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah. So, would you say Nebraska and Sideways are your favorite as well?
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. And you're not in a rush to fill your holes of Downsizing or Citizen Ruth, huh?
I mean, I'd watch Citizen Ruth before I watch Downsizing. That's for damn sure. But we'll see. I mean, I'm more excited to see the Holdovers than either of those.
Yeah, I mean, like I said previously and wrote about in the newsletter, I really like the movie. Paul Giamatti's excellent in it again. I find it a lot of fun, and I guess I was reading something else that Alexander Payne didn't really intend to make a Christmas movie, but since the movie is set during the Christmas break, it kind of organically became a Christmas movie in the Christmas canon, if you will. So yeah, and it definitely has those 70 vibes. I mean, the trailer isn't just a joke for the trailer. The movie carries that throughout the entire movie, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
they kind of wanted to make it as a low budget 70s movie that you kind of found at the video store.
It has that look, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's Alexander Payne. Yeah, I'd say probably my favorite is probably still Sideways, but the Holdovers is probably now my second favorite of it.
Okay.
So,
pretty high praise for Sideways, considering I know how much you enjoyed the Holdovers.
No, I love Sideways.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So, that's Alexander Payne. And John, why don't you tell people how they can find us?
Are we still on X?
Occasionally.
Okay. Well, podcast is on X at It's a Pick Pod, and Max, you're at
MH Colville.
You can also send us an email at itsapictures@gmail.com with your Alexander Payne thoughts or your NBA in-season tournament court thoughts or whatever else is on your mind. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcatching app. While you're there, please leave us a review. 5 stars will help other people discover and enjoy the show. You can also follow us on Letterboxd at It's a Pictures for different lists of what we've been watching. And finally, you can subscribe to the newsletter at itsthepictures.substack.com. What have you been writing about of late, Max?
So I did a review of Killers of the Flower Moon, and then I did an article on the National Geographic movie, The Mission. which is about a young missionary that went to a kind of like island that of people that didn't want to be disturbed, and he didn't survive. And the movie kind of talks about his life and the people that encouraged him and the people that kind of told him it was a bad idea. And I kind of ask people to weigh whether or not they believe whether it was a good idea or a bad idea based on their beliefs. So yeah, I think the movie is definitely worth talking about.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll have to put that on my list. Should we do what we've been watching?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been saving these, but the blank check guys have been doing David Fincher for the last month and a half, and I really wanted to follow along, to watch along. So I finally had an opportunity to watch Alien 3 and 7, which are his first two movies. Alien 3 was one I hadn't seen I only saw it one other time, probably 15 years ago. And I always remember having like a little bit of a soft spot for it. Like, it's sort of thought of as this like just super tortured production, and it was, to, especially for him. I think it was his first movie. He's coming out of the world of music videos, and like kind of doesn't know what he's getting himself into. They didn't have a finished script when they first started shooting, and they just like kind of kept asking him to cut corners, and he really felt, I mean, if anybody knows David Fincher and his reputation, these days is that of a perfectionist and not somebody who's going to say like, hey, I need 30 days to do this, and they say you have 3. So so that's like the behind the scenes story of Alien 3. The on-screen story is that after the events of Aliens, the James Cameron movie, Ripley crash lands on this like prison planet, and like her like sort of adopted daughter is dead, and her male companion is dead, and the android even that's traveling with them is like, sort of unrecognizably destroyed. And she finds herself like basically in hell, and all the prisoners are these like, sort of former murderers and rapists. And at the same time, like, she realizes that there's an alien inside of her, and also one kind of on the prowl, knocking people off one by one. And she has to convince these like awful people to kind of band together to destroy the life form. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely like probably close.
Bleak.
What's that?
Bleak.
Oh, Bleak. Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say closer to the first movie than the second one, which was, this like more actiony movie with Marines. It's closer to horror and just all outright tragedy, like you said. The sort of, climactic action sequences, like there's these alien cam shots where it's like sort of from the perspective of the alien. It's like chasing people through these corridors, which is like kind of cool looking. I think for somebody making his first movie, and for the budget to be kind of like probably half of what it should be or would be if he was doing it 10 years later, it looks pretty good. Charles S. Dutton is kind of like the second lead role, and he's awesome in everything, but he's really awesome in this. He's like kind of like the spiritual leader of the prisoners. They've all like adopted some kind of spirituality, let's say, and he's kind of like their preacher, and he is, an ally for Ripley, and really, really compelling. So yeah, I had fun watching it. It's definitely not as good as the first two Alien movies, but I think it's a lot better than its reputation. It's not something that like I'm going to go to regularly, but like, if I'm going to see it like every once in a while, like I'll always be pleasantly surprised, I think, at how much it holds up.
Yeah, that's one of those sequels that I have not decided to watch, even though I own it many times, because
they've released it a zillion times, and
they released them as quadrilogy box sets, and I just watched the first 2 films and just ignored the other 2.
Why do you buy a box set with 4?
Because that's how they were selling them.
Oh, come on. Watch it sometime. It's pretty good.
And then 7, everybody knows 7's good.
7, everybody knows 7. 7 rules. Just really enjoyed watching it again.
And you could feel great that Kevin Spacey's the villain this time.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's a great movie. It always leaves me in a great mood.
At least you're in a great mood. I don't think so.
A great mood at how good the movie is.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so I have not been watching Blank Check, but John, I did reshare our David Fincher episode that we did with Roxana Hadidi a few years ago. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I reshared that because The Killer's coming out very soon.
Yeah.
And so I figured that would be a nice tie-in, and that's another Netflix movie I'll watch because I don't tend to watch Netflix movies unless they have like a lot of buzz behind them.
Well, this one will.
What, The Killer? Yeah, they have a lot of advertising for it.
Yeah, so I guess we would have done that episode around Mank, probably.
No, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Right before Mank came out.
Very good.
And then, so speaking about Netflix movies, John, I did decide to watch one today.
Yes.
And it just came out, and apparently, like, the Sylvester Stallone documentary came out too, and that might be something I watch. But Netflix movies, who knew? This one is Naiad, and it has Annette Bening and Jodie Foster in it, and it's about the real life swimmer, also known as Naiad, who attempted to swim from Cuba to Florida multiple times. They only make movies about people if they actually accomplish it, so spoilers, she does eventually accomplish it.
That's good.
The movie kind of details how she's a 60-year-old woman who's trying this momentous feat and like what she goes through in order to accomplish it. It's directed by the team that did Free Solo and The Rescue, so they're familiar with like sports documentaries.
Sure.
This is like Naiad's character is like another like egotistical athlete. You know, you kind of have to be when like you're pushing to do these outrageous things, I guess.
Yeah.
And Annette Bening does a good job as always capturing that. But for my money, I thought like Jodie Foster was just really great in this as like the supporting character to her, and she has a lot of the more meaningful moments in the movie, in my opinion. But yeah, it's an okay watch. It didn't blow the world apart, and
well, that's good. We don't want to blow the world apart.
I guess if you got 2 hours and you like sports uplifting stories, and you could do worse.
There you go.
That's Naiad on Netflix. And the other one I watched, because I try to watch a spooky movie every October, and this time, like, because it was very popular on the Criterion channel, and I was like, oh, I've never seen it, so I watched John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. And that stars Jurassic Park's Sam Neill. I was going to mention that earlier when you mentioned Laura Dern. Like, right around the same time that she did Citizen Ruth, Sam Neill was doing this. And it's a really fun movie where, like, Sam Neill's character plays, like, an insurance agent who has to, like, find out where this mega author is because he's missing. And they need to track him down and get his latest treatment for his new book because he's like a bestseller. Like, I think his like last name is like Kane, and like it's very obviously that he's supposed to be like Stephen King. And so Sam Neill's character is joined by Kane's editor, and they try to locate him, and they go to a small town that's very bizarre. And I think like another reason why I wanted to watch it is because there's this recent video game out called Alan Wake, and the sequel came out recently, and it's about like a guy who is trapped in like a like haunted world, and like what he writes comes to life. And in the Mouth of Madness kind of does that too, as this writer is almost like evil in the movie, and he's like writing this altered reality with like aliens and stuff like that. So it's a pretty fun movie. I find myself, whenever I watch a new John Carpenter movie, that I enjoy it. And so like I have like 4 that I've never seen, like Big Trouble in Little China, Starman, Assault on Precinct 13, and Escape of New York, or something like that. And I'm pretty sure I'll enjoy all 4 of them.
I mean, he makes good movies.
Yeah. I mean, like that's what it comes down to. It's like I think like even like some of his like worst reviewed movies are still pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I generally agree. I mean, although I've probably not seen some of the really bad, poorly reviewed ones, I should say. But yeah, I always enjoy John Carpenter.
Yeah, good director, that Carpenter.
Indeed. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're at wrap up, John.
Alrighty. Well, hey, this was fun. Thank you as always, and we thank you for listening. Talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.